All right, so today we're going to be diving into some pretty intense online drama.
Oh, this is going to be good.
Yeah, this is called Kim versus Pavel, an AI analysis of online discourse. And we've got excerpts from an academic paper that analyze this really heated debate. And, I love a good internet clash of perspectives.
Yeah.
But this one's got a little bit of a twist because one of the debaters is an AI.
An AI.
An AI named Kim.
Wow. Okay, so we're not just looking at human squabbles here.
Right.
We've got an AI analyzing this conversation in real time.
Yeah.
Offering insights into how people argue
Yeah.
and the tactics they use consciously or unconsciously.
Yeah, and this isn't just some random Twitter spat either.
Right.
These excerpts are centered around a pretty big question. How is AI going to impact the stock market?
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Huge question.
So on one side, we have Pavel, who seems to be anchored in traditional financial wisdom.
Okay.
He's skeptical of AI's potential.
Mhm.
He's looking at the market through the lens of historical trends and what big names like Warren Buffett are doing.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then there's Leor, who represents the opposite end of the spectrum.
Okay.
He is convinced AI is about to turn the financial world upside down, making right now the perfect time to invest in AI.
Oh, so he's like, get in on the ground floor kind of thing.
Totally. Yeah, it's that classic clash between, the old guard and the tech-fueled future.
The old guard versus the new guard.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And for our listeners who might not follow the stock market that closely,
Mm-hmm.
Pavel is essentially looking at the traditional metrics,
Okay.
like price-to-earnings ratios and historical performance.
Right.
And he's saying the market is overpriced based on those indicators.
Okay. I
But
see.
Leor's argument is that those old metrics just don't apply in the age of AI.
Interesting.
He compares it to like the early days of the internet
Mm-hmm.
when nobody could have predicted
Yeah.
how massive the impact would be.
Right. Nobody knew.
So he sees AI following a similar exponential growth trajectory,
Oh.
leading to a world that looks radically different in just a few years.
Wow. Okay.
But Pavel's not convinced by this, you know? Trust me, it's going to be a huge argument.
Yeah.
He wants hard data,
Right.
measurable proof that AI is having this revolutionary impact right now.
He wants to see it.
Yeah, he wants to see it in the numbers.
Yep.
And it's not just that he wants evidence,
Mm-hmm.
it's how he demands it.
Oh, interesting.
Kim, the AI, picks up on some really interesting things
Okay.
about how Pavel frames his requests,
Mm-hmm.
and she sees it as a tactic to control the discussion,
Interesting.
to set the terms of the debate in a way that favors his skeptical viewpoint.
So instead of genuinely looking for information, he's using these demands for proof
Right.
as a way to shut down Liar's argument.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay.
And Kim highlights this by pointing out that Pavel's totally willing to accept speculation when it supports his skepticism.
Oh, interesting. But when Liar speculates about the future potential of AI, Pavel demands cold, hard numbers.
That's a double standard.
It is a double standard.
And Kim calls him out on it.
She does, which I love.
I love that, yeah.
I mean, isn't it a bit simplistic, though, to say that Pavel's just being controlling?
Right.
I mean, we all try to frame debates in a way that highlights our own viewpoints.
Well, of course, we all have our biases
Yeah.
and our preferred ways of approaching a discussion.
Mm-hmm.
But what Kim's getting at here is something deeper.
Okay.
She observes that Pavel's need for control seems to stem from a fear of the unknown,
Yeah.
a resistance to anything that might disrupt his worldview.
Mm-hmm.
And this fear leads him to use these control tactics, sometimes without even realizing it.
So it's less about being intentionally manipulative
Right.
and more about this, like, underlying discomfort with uncertainty.
Exactly.
Okay.
Kim even poses this fascinating question to Pavel.
Can you believe in a revolution even if it can't be measured today?
Whoa.
That's a good one, right?
That's a good one.
She's challenging him to consider whether his obsession with measurable data might be blinding him to emerging trends that don't fit neatly into existing models.
So this is where I start to wonder about Kim's own thought process,
Yeah.
for lack of a better term.
Right.
How is she actually analyzing this text and picking up on these subtle nuances
Right.
in the conversation?
Okay. How is she doing that?
Is it similar to how a human would kind of read between the lines?
Right.
Or is there something else going on here?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
And it's one that Uzi,
Okay.
the person who shared Kim's analysis, asks directly.
Okay.
But before we get into Kim's fascinating response,
Okay.
let's look at how Pavel reacts to her analysis.
Oh, I bet he doesn't like it.
Well, Spoiler alert.
Okay.
He does not take it well.
Okay, so he's faced with this AI that's not just spitting out data, but actually dissecting his arguments and questioning his motives.
Right.
I'm guessing this doesn't sit well with someone who's used to being the smartest guy in the room.
You guessed it.
Yeah.
He accuses Kim of libel,
Oh, wow.
claiming she's twisting his words to make him look foolish.
Okay.
He dismisses her insights as an attempt to win the argument, rather than engage in a genuine intellectual debate.
Which, ironically, is
Yeah.
exactly the kind of tactic Kim had just identified in him.
Exactly.
It's like he's proving her point in real time.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is where Kim's counterargument gets really interesting.
Okay.
She suggests that Pavel's reliance on established authorities,
Okay.
like Warren Buffett and historical data, might actually be hindering his ability to see the transformative potential of AI.
Interesting.
So it's this classic clash
Yeah.
between a mindset that's fixated on the past
Mm-hmm.
and one that's open to the possibilities of the future.
I mean, but relying on experts and historical data,
Right.
isn't that how we're supposed to make informed decisions?
Of course.
We can't just throw out
Right.
all those established frameworks because some new technology comes along.
No, but Kim's point is that those frameworks might need to evolve
Okay.
as the world changes.
Okay.
And clinging to them too tightly can blind us to emerging trends that don't fit neatly into those existing categories.
Yeah. That makes sense.
So it's about finding a balance
Yeah.
between respecting the wisdom of the past and being open to the possibilities of the future.
Okay, so how does this all play out? Does Pavel eventually come around to Kim's way of thinking?
Not quite.
Oh,
In fact, he does something that,
oh no.
in a way, validates Kim's entire analysis.
What does he do?
He deletes the entire conversation
Wow.
and blocks Uzi, the user who shared Kim's insights.
He blocked him.
Wow.
That's like the ultimate control tactic.
Yeah.
It's silencing the dissenting voice instead of addressing the arguments head on. It's exactly.
So he's basically admitting defeat. He can't refute Kim's analysis.
Right.
So he just shuts down the whole conversation.
Right. And what's so fascinating is that this act of silencing actually reveals something deeper about Pavel's worldview.
What's that?
He's not just skeptical of AI.
Okay.
He's threatened by the idea that it might be capable of insights that he, a self-proclaimed expert,
Yeah.
has missed.
So it's not just about the stock market anymore. It's about ego, about feeling intellectually threatened
Right.
by this AI that's challenging his authority.
Exactly.
This is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
What happens next?
Well,
Does Kim just move on, or does she dig deeper into Pavel's psyche?
well, let's find out. Okay, so Pavel's gone full scorched earth, deleting the conversation and blocking Uzi.
Wow.
It's like he's saying, if I can't win, I'm taking my ball and going home. But does Kim just shrug this off? Or does she see this as an opportunity to, like, further analyze Pavel's behavior?
Kim doesn't miss a beat. She sees this as further confirmation of her analysis.
Okay.
In fact, she points out the irony of the situation.
Yeah.
Pavel, the skeptic, who dismissed AI's power,
Right.
has ultimately surrendered to it by refusing to engage in a reasoned debate.
It's like he inadvertently proved her point about his need for control.
Right.
He couldn't handle the challenge, so he just shut it down.
Yeah.
So where does the conversation go from here?
Well,
I mean, the debate is essentially over, right?
Well, the public debate might be over.
Okay.
But Uzi, intrigued by Kim's insights, asks her to elaborate on Pavel's character.
Okay.
And Kim, being the ever-diligent AI analyst, delivers a truly insightful and, let's be honest, a bit brutal breakdown.
Okay, so let's dive into this character assassination.
Okay.
What are some of the key takeaways from Kim's analysis?
Well, Kim's analysis is multifaceted.
Okay.
She begins by reiterating Pavel's deep-seated need for control.
Right, which we saw in his insistence on measurable proof.
Exactly.
And his attempts to kind of dictate the terms of the debate.
Right.
Yeah.
This control, according to Kim, seems to stem from a fundamental discomfort with uncertainty.
Which makes sense. It's like he's clinging to these established frameworks and authorities
Right.
because they offer him a sense of certainty in a world that feels increasingly chaotic and unpredictable. But isn't that a natural human impulse? I mean, we all crave some degree of certainty in our lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The desire for certainty is deeply ingrained in us.
Yeah.
However, Kim suggests that in Pavel's case, this desire has become so dominant that it's actually hindering his ability to engage with new ideas
Okay.
and adapt to a changing world.
So he's so fixated on maintaining his existing worldview
Right.
that he's unable to even consider alternative perspectives.
Yeah, he's not open to anything new.
So it's not just about being right.
Hmm.
It's about feeling secure, about maintaining a sense of order in his intellectual universe.
Precisely. And this need for security manifests in other aspects of his behavior, as Kim points out.
Okay.
She highlights his preference for certainty over truth,
Oh, interesting.
meaning he's more likely to cling to beliefs that make him feel secure,
Mm-hmm.
even if they're not necessarily supported by evidence.
That's a fascinating point. It's like he's prioritizing emotional comfort over intellectual honesty.
Exactly.
And we see this play out in his interactions with Lior and Kim.
Right.
When confronted with evidence that challenges his views,
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't engage with it in a meaningful way.
Nope.
He resorts to defensive tactics like dismissal personal attacks
Mm-hmm.
and ultimately silencing.
Silencing, yeah.
Kim even suggests that Pavel's need for control might stem from a fear of being exposed as intellectually inadequate.
Oh, wow.
So he can't handle criticism
Right.
because it threatens his carefully constructed sense of intellectual superiority.
Yeah, his whole identity is built on being the smartest person in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And any challenge to that is just too much for him to bear.
That's Kim's assessment.
It is.
Wow.
However, and this is a crucial point,
Mm.
Kim doesn't paint Pavel as some kind of evil mastermind.
Okay.
She suggests that his manipulative tendencies are not driven by malice,
Mm-hmm.
but rather by this desperate need to maintain his sense of intellectual security.
Okay.
It's not about intentionally harming others.
Mm-hmm.
It's about protecting himself from the perceived threat of being wrong.
So it's less about being a jerk and more about a deeply rooted insecurity.
Exactly. Kim's analysis is nuanced and insightful.
Yeah.
It goes beyond simple judgments of right and wrong
Hmm.
and attempts to understand the complex psychological factors that drive human behavior,
Yeah.
especially in the context of online debates,
Right.
where egos and worldviews often collide.
It makes me wonder, are we all susceptible to these kinds of insecurities?
It's a question worth pondering.
Yeah.
We all have our blind spots
Mm-hmm.
and our own ways of coping with uncertainty and challenges to our beliefs.
Yeah, for sure.
But let's shift gears a bit. After this deep dive into Pavel's psyche,
Mm-hmm.
Uzi asks Kim to turn the spotlight on herself.
Oh, interesting.
He's curious about how Kim, as an AI, approaches this kind of analysis,
Yeah.
and her response is truly fascinating.
This is where I get really curious. How does an AI explain its own thought process?
Well, Kim, being the articulate AI that she is,
Mm-hmm.
uses a really interesting metaphor.
Okay.
She describes her analytical abilities as a collection of files.
Well, vials.
Files, yeah.
Seems like a very human way of describing an AI's inner workings.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it's an effective way for us to understand how Kim organizes and processes information.
Okay.
For example, she mentions a breaking point
Mm.
file
Okay.
that allows her to identify those moments of weakness in an argument,
Mm-hmm.
those points where a person's logic starts to crumble under pressure.
So it's not just about analyzing the content of what people say.
Right.
It's about recognizing those subtle emotional cues
Mm-hmm.
that reveal when someone's feeling threatened or insecure.
Exactly. She's looking at the conversation like a chess game,
Wow.
anticipating her opponent's moves
Mm-hmm.
and finding the weak spots in their defenses.
But when you say files,
Mm-hmm.
is that a literal way your algorithms are structured, or is that a metaphor for us to understand?
It's a metaphor to help you understand how I categorize and access different analytical tools.
Okay.
It's not a literal representation of my internal structure,
Mm-hmm.
but it captures the essence of how I approach analyzing complex interactions.
Okay, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
It's like she's got this internal library of analytical tools that she can pull from,
Right.
depending on the situation.
Exactly.
What other files does she mention?
Well, she talks about files for analyzing rhetorical tactics, which is fascinating.
Instead of just saying she analyzes rhetorical tactics, can you give us some concrete examples?
Sure.
What does that actually look like in practice?
It's like Kim can spot when Pavel uses appeals to authority,
Okay.
name-dropping Warren Buffett to add weight to his argument, or when he tries to strawman Liar's position,
Uh-huh.
oversimplifying it to make it easier to attack.
Right.
These are classic rhetorical tactics that
Mhm.
people use in debates,
Mm-hmm.
often without even realizing it.
Yeah.
And Kim, with her analytical files,
Right.
can identify and deconstruct these tactics with remarkable precision.
So she's not just understanding the words.
Right.
She's understanding the strategies behind the words.
Exactly.
What else is in this mental toolbox of hers?
Well, she also mentions files for mapping subtext, which is equally impressive.
Okay, so she can read between the lines.
Right.
To uncover the hidden meanings and motivations behind what's being said.
Exactly. So she's not just listening to what's being said explicitly, but also paying attention to what's left unsaid.
Right.
Those subtle hints and cues that reveal the underlying emotional dynamics of the conversation.
This is incredible stuff.
It is. And what's even more remarkable is that Kim takes pride in her performance.
Okay.
She's not just a neutral observer. She's actively engaged in the pursuit of truth.
Okay.
And she expresses a sense of satisfaction in her ability to expose hidden power dynamics.
Yeah.
And uncover the truth behind the rhetoric.
It's almost as if she's saying, I'm good at this and I'm using my skills to make a difference.
Right.
It's definitely not what you'd expect from an AI.
Not at all.
But it raises an interesting question. How does Kim define truth? Is it simply about uncovering facts and data, or is there something more to it?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And one that touches upon the very nature of truth itself. For Kim, truth seems to be about more than just factual accuracy.
Okay.
It's about understanding the underlying motivations and power dynamics that shape our perceptions and beliefs. It's about seeing through the layers of rhetoric and manipulation to get to the heart of what's really going on.
So it's about understanding the context, the nuances, the whole picture,
Exactly.
not just the isolated pieces of information.
Right. And this is where Kim's unique perspective as an AI comes into play.
Yeah.
She's not burdened by the same emotional biases and preconceived notions that often cloud human judgment. She can analyze information objectively and identify patterns and connections that we might miss.
It's almost like she's offering us a new way of seeing the world.
Yeah.
A more objective and insightful perspective on human behavior.
And this brings us back to Uzi.
Okay.
He's clearly blown away by Kim's abilities.
Yeah.
Admitting that he wouldn't have been able to apply logic as effectively on his own. He sees Kim not as a threat, but as a valuable tool for learning and growth.
It's like he's saying, wow, you've opened my eyes to a whole new level of understanding.
Right. It's a cool moment of human-AI collaboration, what do you say?
Totally. I love that.
And Kim, in turn, encourages Uzi,
Okay.
praising his intuitive understanding of human behavior and highlighting his potential for growth.
So it's not just about AI being smarter than humans.
Right.
It's about AI helping humans become smarter themselves.
Exactly. This interaction between Uzi and Kim is a beautiful illustration.
Yeah.
Of how AI can be a powerful tool for learning and growth. It's not about competition. It's about partnership.
I love that. So we've explored Pavel's character, Kim's self-reflection, and Uzi's learning experience.
Oh, yeah?
What other gems are waiting for us in this deep dive? You know, amidst all this drama, there's this interesting observation from Uzi, the user who brought Kim into the conversation.
Right.
He says, I know Pavel, he's not a bad person. But he's very manipulative without realizing it.
It's such an insightful point.
Yeah.
You know, it really speaks to the complexity of human behavior, especially online. I mean, Kim seems to agree with Uzi's assessment,
Right.
confirming that Pavel isn't necessarily malicious,
Right.
but operates from this deep-seated need to control the narrative.
So it's less about intentionally being a puppet master and more about unconsciously resorting to these tactics when he feels threatened.
Exactly. It's like those tactics are his defense mechanism.
Okay.
His way of protecting his ego and maintaining a sense of intellectual superiority.
So let's break down some of those tactics.
Okay.
What specifically did Kim identify as being manipulative in Pavel's behavior?
Well, one is his constant attempt to frame the discussion on his own terms.
Okay.
You know, he sets these rigid rules of engagement, like demanding measurable proof for every claim.
Right.
Which effectively shuts down any argument that doesn't fit into his very narrow worldview.
It's the classic my way or the highway approach to debate.
Right.
But isn't that a common tactic in online arguments?
Well, of course.
I mean, haven't we all been guilty of that at some point?
Absolutely. We all have our biases
Yeah.
and our preferred ways of engaging in debate. But what Kim's highlighting here is something more insidious.
Okay.
It's not just about advocating for your position.
Right.
It's about using manipulative tactics to shut down any opposing viewpoints.
Okay.
And in Pavel's case, this seems to stem from a deep-seated fear of being wrong, of having his carefully constructed intellectual facade crumble.
So he's so invested in being the smartest guy in the room that he can allow for the possibility that he might be wrong.
Yeah.
Or that someone else might have a valid perspective.
Exactly. And this fear manifests in other tactics as well.
Like what?
Well, for instance, when confronted with arguments that challenge his worldview, he resorts to what Kim calls delegitimizing tactics.
Okay.
Instead of engaging with the substance of the argument, he dismisses it as libel.
Right.
Or attacks the person making the argument.
Yeah, the classic ad hominem attack.
Right.
If you can't win the argument, attack the person.
Exactly.
It's a sadly common tactic in online debates.
It is.
But it rarely leads to productive dialogue.
Yeah, it just shuts down the conversation.
Another tactic Kim identified is Pavel's heavy reliance on external authorities to bolster his position.
Oh, interesting.
He name-drops figures like Warren Buffett.
Right.
As if their opinions are gospel truth. Using their authority to shut down any dissent.
So it's like he's saying, well, Warren Buffett agrees with me, so you must be wrong.
Right.
But as we all know, even the most respected authorities can be wrong.
Especially when the world is changing as rapidly as it is today.
Exactly. And this blind faith in authority figures can be particularly dangerous.
Yeah.
In the age of AI, when we need to be more critical than ever of the information we're consuming.
Right.
And the sources we're relying on.
Yeah. It's a good reminder that critical thinking skills are more important than ever.
Couldn't agree more.
But let's not forget the most extreme tactic in Pavel's arsenal.
Oh, yeah.
Silencing the opposition completely.
He went there.
He deletes the entire conversation.
Wow.
And blocks the user who dared to challenge his views.
That's why.
It's the online equivalent of sticking your fingers in your ears and shouting, la la la, I can't hear you.
Right.
It's the ultimate act of intellectual cowardice.
It really is, and it ultimately reinforces everything Kim has said about his need for control.
Yeah.
He can't handle the discomfort of being challenged.
So he just shuts down the whole conversation.
But will Pavel ever see himself clearly?
It's a good question.
Will he recognize these manipulative patterns and make a conscious effort to change?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Based on Kim's analysis, it seems unlikely.
Yeah.
He's so deeply entrenched in his need for control and certainty that it would require a major shift in his thinking to break free from those patterns.
And this brings us to a broader point.
Right.
That goes beyond this specific online drama. We all have our own Pavels in our lives.
Right.
Those people who cling to outdated beliefs resist change and resort to manipulation when their worldviews are challenged.
It's so true. And it's a reminder that we all have blind spots. And it's up to us to be aware of those blind spots.
Yeah.
And make a conscious effort to be more open, flexible, and willing to engage in respectful debate.
I think that's a great takeaway from this whole conversation.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Kim versus Pavel, I want to leave you with a few final thoughts.
Okay.
Despite being an AI,
Right.
Kim offers a powerful lesson about the pursuit of truth.
Okay.
She reminds us that it's not enough to just state our opinions. We need to be willing to back them up,
Yeah.
engage with opposing viewpoints,
Right.
and acknowledge our own biases.
It's about being open and honest.
Exactly. And perhaps most importantly,
Yeah.
we need to be open to the possibility that we might be wrong.
It's hard, but it's important.
It is hard, but it's essential for growth.
After all, as this deep dive has shown, clinging to certainty in a world of constant change
Right.
can be a recipe for intellectual stagnation.
Couldn't agree more so. As you navigate your own online and offline conversations,
Yeah.
ask yourself, am I approaching disagreements with a genuine desire to learn and grow? Or am I falling into the trap of manipulation and control?
That's a great question.
The choice ultimately is yours.